officer in charge, I'd like to ask him a few questions.
What were you
I've been here a
looking
few
for?
times asking for him, and he has not been in. At least that's what I'm being told.
Well, but you tried to make an appointment, right?
I tried to see him on 3 occasions. I met with the officer, Corporal Pete, here in Orinjoa that represents the Professional Standard Branch. But I was supposed to hear back from her up to yesterday, and my advice to my counsel will come to the media. And Robertson is the first media house I'm calling about this.
Well, maybe it seems you'll have to go above their heads. I know the commissioner is quite open
Yeah.
and extremely friendly, so maybe you need to try and go directly to him. I'm sure he will give you a chance.
Are they refusing to take the report? I'm not quite clear.
Excuse me?
Are they refusing to take the report? They're just not. They're just
Well,
not.
I have given the report already to the Professional Standard Branch here. What happened, I mean, unfortunate, after I gave the report, the printer was not working. So I couldn't sign the report.
What?
So up to yesterday, I said, well, the officer, with due respect to her, said, well, she was going to call me or text me yesterday. So up to yesterday, after 5 p.m., nada.
And this incident happened on 28th of December?
Yes, ma'am. Just after midnight, Saturday, 28th
You gotta keep
December,
it alive. You gotta keep
to
it
1
alive.
a.m., 29 December, Sunday.
And they knocked on your door, or they just barged in?
They just jumped out their vehicle that I want attack. You know, no different term. I was standing on my veranda.
You guys were you inside the house? Were you awake?
They were on the veranda?
I was awakened by an incident that occurred outside, but the loud banging, yelling that woke me up,
So they-
made me come outside.
And the
The
cops
attack was on my end.
went into your house.
Opened my closed gate into my yard. I called out to them, Danoya, that over there. They still barged in right up to my step, at least 5 feet from the gate. When they stepped back,
Oh, they didn't come up to your
veranda.
house.
Yes, they did.
They came
Matter
to
of
your
fact,
house.
invaded my home and my privacy. The lady of the house was in her bed sleeping. Tanglad in the cover, the night mechanic di chili, in the cover.
Yeah, I know. And there's no explanation. Nobody's giving you an explanation for it.
Absolutely none.
You're trying
Was
to get
the
closure
report
on this.
made based on what they did? Because
He's saying he did a report. The report is in the system, but he can't sign it.
No, I mean not his report against them, because normally they have to provide something.
Well,
when
that's
they
what
do
he's
that,
trying to
not
find
sure.
out. But the commander-in-chief there is not responding to his...
Ernesto, I would take, should you have the commissioner's number that I could reach him?
No, I don't have that on me. No, I don't have that on me. No,
We've
but
taken-
that's not difficult
Yeah.
to do. Just
Just
call headquarters.
Just call the headquarters.
Call in Belmopan and ask for audience. That's all. Yeah, they have a method of doing it. There's a process.
Yeah.
Just-
I've taken your details, so they can, if they're listening, they can get in touch with us at the station here, and we can provide them all the details to get
Well,
in touch
that
with
we
you.
got, but you need to get in touch
Yeah.
with them. Yeah, at that point, you have to keep following
It's
this up.
unfortunate. It's a whole weekend. Judge.
Well, girl and boy, have a blessed day.
You too, sir. And I hope you get closure on this
Yes, we
incident.
do.
I hope you do. I really hope you
You have a
do
good
get
day.
closure. Well,
But
there we
that's
go.
interesting.
Speaking of Belize and her finding her way, you know, it's conflicting.
But I mean, how do you go into someone's home in the middle, literally in the middle of the night, and don't say what you're doing there?
Right. Well, obviously there was some sort of altercation in the neighborhood.
Perhaps.
Now, if the cops want to come into your area, they have to tell you why. They have to.
Exactly.
They just can't come into your home.
But I mean, even that, let's consider there's an incident in the area, and you get to my house, and my house is pitch black, because I'm obviously fast and bloody asleep. Why would you assume that the incident is in there when the house is pitch black?
But they have a right to check.
I mean,
You
to
know,
check, but
they
not
could
to-
knock on the door and say, Mr.
Exactly.
So-and-so, you know, is everything okay?
Exactly.
You know, so on. But he's telling us
Yeah.
they just barge into his yard and then into his home.
What if he had dogs?
Well,
You
yeah,
think it would have hurt the dogs to get in?
I guess.
I tell you. Well, we had somebody who said to me that they think that Belize is baby Jesus. I don't know how I'm supposed to take that.
That it's the savior of the world.
I don't know.
Maybe that's what they meant. Maybe that's the calling of Belize, and we don't know it yet.
I don't know.
The tourist board says it's a curious place.
It,
I was looking up the word curious. I'm not sure. Yeah, but it may have a point. You know, it's curious. Yeah,
curious
yeah.
is...
It used to be the best kept secret.
No, it's not.
You know, but I'm glad that we don't want to be a secret. We want
We don't
people to
be a
know how
secret,
beautiful
but we
we
don't
are.
want to be a secret for being like on the financial blacklist
Yeah.
and for being the highest in murder rate. We don't want to. We don't want to.
You know, I traveled in on Sunday and the plane was full. And it was mostly visitors to our country.
Really?
Mostly. Which does say something.
that's
You know,
good, yeah.
she's still
She's still
my wife
keeping
is
up
reading
with
a new
the
novel and she showed me quickly
Ah.
that Belize, and this is happening a lot.
More, yes.
Referred in novels and in writings.
Yes.
And it's always, but the thing is, it always comes that the person is in Belize on vacation.
Yeah. Or doing something with it.
Or hiding in Belize. Yeah.
No, you know who has the best reference to Belize? National
No.
Geographic and Jeopardy.
Oh, yeah?
every time a category comes out, Belize is in there. Big screaming. Because the other time Belize not mentioned, we talk about we're running away to hide from taxes. Or they talk about, what was it? I think it was CSI. Not CSI. It was one of the Fox shows. Them. They had one of the episodes supposedly filmed in Belize.
Oh, yeah.
Fakest Belizean
Of
actor I've
course,
ever
they're
heard in my
fake.
life.
Yeah, exactly. They
But it's probably like what happened to Chet. You were reading the news with for the Golden Globes. I didn't watch it. I was
didn't watch
reading
it
the news.
either.
And there's a news that came out because Tom Hanks was getting a Lifetime
Award,
Achievement
yeah.
Award, and his son. I don't know. I presume his son lived in Jamaica. I don't know if they've been living in Jamaica. I don't know. I don't know what's the connection. Anywho, his son congratulated his father in Creole.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah,
Supposedly Creole.
Well, supposedly Creole. And he's like, nah, man, you know, like, how he, I was like, why?
That's supposed to be trendy. See, that's
But
supposed to be
what I mean,
trendy.
You know, people are on him because they were like, it's cultural appropriation and that he was disingenuous and they just went off on him. So he made the best comment and I thought that was good. He's like, oh, wow. It's good to know that World War III isn't happening right now, and this is the most important thing for you all to talk about, which was quite very frankly
it's
true.
true. It's,
Because there's so much more important things going on, and for people to be picking at all the petty things that people are doing. I mean, listen, if you're thinking of Jamaican, go ahead, my friend, live your best life at 2020.
Yeah. Well, I think that you take insult when they do it and they make a poor
Yeah, but
representation of it, you know. And
I
then
don't-
I say, but they're not so we song, man. You know?
it wasn't great,
No.
but I've heard a lot worse.
Yeah.
Hi, good morning.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. I can barely hear you, sir.
Yeah, Happy New Year too.
Could
Happy
you
New Year.
speak into your phone directly so we hear you?
And Mr. Ernesto, good morning.
Yeah.
Little contribution here. I am struck with the idea.
I
Sir,
can't hear you good, you know. You're really low. Is it your phone or?
I don't know. I'm walking around the yard here to see if I can get.
Would you be able to turn up the volume just a little bit? Because I've maxed out mine, but I'm still not hearing you.
You maxed out right now.
All right. Just speak directly into the mouthpiece and we should hear you better.
I'm talking directly into
Right.
the phone.
Yeah, that's a little better.
Anyway, my contribution to this point is that it took me strange that when I hear these statistics about murder for the month of January, first one died. For the month, it's like we're making a score of stuff that I don't think that that's appropriate for the victims, parents who are, or the people who are survivor of the victims and stuff like that. And that, to me, is putting a damper on the criminals that feel like, well, yeah, we're in a good race and we're racing around the police. The police are doing a very good job.
I'm telling you, because of the fact with the resources that we do have. And I would like to hear them more toned down on that amount of last year compared to this year, compared to that year. No, compared to other countries. Look, this is Belize. This is our country. And we have a lot of things at stake. Our industries are going to hand in a handbasket. And we have to start to build back confidence in the citizens of this country to mobilize and move, to make things roll, to make the wheels start turning better. Yeah. And we need to, everybody has to put their hand to the wheel. And let's sample, we can sample corruption. I mean, we only what, 400,000 people in a small country that is very, very beautiful. The whole world is now to find the best kept secret is no secret at all right now. And the point is that we need to protect it. And each and every one of us has to put our hands to the wheel. We have a backlog of the 1900s, so when that looks back 2020 is high again now. Yes, that's true. But what happened to the chest of bones that we have buried somewhere, passports, our Senate hearings? What these things are what makes up to give us direction on where we got to go, what we got to do, and how we got to remedy the whole situation. Because I'll tell you the truth, looking at the candidates for the new election coming up, I don't see it at all. I don't see no leadership, I don't see no direction, I don't see nothing for my people, I don't see nothing for my country. And if it takes me to be the advocate, I will do it because of the fact that it's here. I live in a village, and it's a PUP, UDP, whatever.
I'm not getting everything he's saying.
And we don't have no community center. We don't have no streets. We don't have no water board. We don't have nothing in this village. And it's funny that this is where people vote. This is where they get the $50. This is where and when they throw a party, even if it's raining, the people still come out. And when you go there to tell them about the watershed and how we're going to clean up the plastic and stuff in the village, nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to come out. But you telling me a tamales and Mr. Minister is coming and, oh lad, everybody dressed up and when you look out there, you don't see no Belize and all you see is foreigners. So I don't understand. So my contribution to this is that let's hold down on that and that number for the murder for the month and murder for the year and who this and who that. I thank you all for listening and have a happy year.
Same to you, sir. Thank you for calling.
I didn't hear him. Well,
he was,
I get the gist of what he's saying.
He was saying that a lot of times that
it's how we present it. Unfortunately, negativity comes
he's like, it's like we're keeping score about, but, and then he also made a point about how people are willing to take the $50 and want to mobilize when you have political parties and get-togethers, but when you're talking about lobbying to get water board and get things done in the village, nobody shows up.
Well, there you go. We're asking what kind of person would Belize be? Maybe a person who, like you said, does not have confidence in herself.
Yeah.
Doesn't believe that she can do things. Doesn't believe that she has the intelligence or the physical ability or the capacity to move forward and present herself in a more positive way to the world and to
What do you think that's an internal thing? That's something that we have to fix ourselves. Is that something that we can?
Complacency is something that's occurring.
But it's not a.
Not only it's not. We don't have the monopoly on that.
We don't.
But
you notice that this year, well, not this year, last year, in particular, people were moving away from that. There were so many countries that evolved and that stepped away from the status quo and said, something. Yes, we want democracy, but this is not how it's working for us. It's not working for them.
Basically, everybody's unhappy with their leaders. That's it boils down to that.
Yeah.
Everybody's unhappy with the way they're being led.
Good morning.
Good morning, ladies
morning, sir.
and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Prosperous and happy New Year.
Same to you, sir.
Yes, Leo Bando here.
Yes, Mr. Bando.
Yes, at the end of every year we look at ourselves and we look at the role of the media in Belize. I ask Love FM, have you taken time to do a study of your role and contribution to the national development of Belize in terms of the mass media communication that you are set to represent?
I think we do. Yeah. It's a thin line we draw, but yeah, I think we do.
Okay, looking at three aspects of the mass media contribution to any development is one, to inform, educate, and entertain. The if we look at that, at those three characteristics, and we try to give a percentage in terms of the information that OFM handles, what percent would you give? In terms of education, what percent would you give? And also,
You mean like from 1 to 100?
well, I mean, we're looking at 100 as a totality, but if you say, let's say the information that you give is 33% criminal oriented.
I see.
Another 30% could be, educated information. And
That's a good question.
5% could be musical or other entertainment. So we're trying to look at the news that you guys provide, the entertainment that you guys provide, the level of information that educates people, so that we could better understand the role and the contribution of LOVFM to the national development of Belize.
Yeah.
I'm just putting this because I believe that it's very important. I mean, I
And
have.
you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. As a fourth estate, you're right. You're right. It's important. We operate in a very how shall I say environment here that is not regulated like in other areas. We have some regulation, so we have to self-regulate.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. We try to be as independent as we can, which is right there, and we can discuss. Well, what we see as an independent medium, we try to give you useful information. I think we do that. We try to give you timely information. Let me tell you how I think, not percentages, but if you think we're not doing that, okay, useful information, timely information, we try to be objective. Sometimes we may fail in that, but we really try to be objective, committed to the. I think one way we try to be committed to the greater good.
Yeah.
We try not to put ourselves in a box and maybe only support one or the other. We try very hard to be across the board as much as we can. We try to be open.
Let's look at your news. You have a news report in the morning, and then you have one midday and one evening. I have broken down into pieces the percentages of, let's say, criminal-oriented activities in Belize, and it's like 60%. And then I look at the other information that would do with, let's say, agriculture, whatever, another percentage, education, another percentage.
Yeah.
Now we have to be careful that we don't really try to create a cultural criminal frenzy society, because if the majority of our news concentrates on policing, automatically then we tend to give the impression that Belize is totally bad. So we got to really be watchful. We also have to improve on our reporting, because it's easy to
do more investigation.
To do a criminal thing, because you just get somebody, kill somebody crashed there. But it's not like going to the citrus and do a research and make a report, or go to the sugarcane farmers and do a research and make a report. Or go to the schools. You know, there is a need, I think, to uplift and upgrade.
The news, you're talking about the news within the news.
Yeah, look at the news. Yeah.
And you're right. It's not an excuse. We live in an environment here where, it's not as easy to do that. And you need expertise, you need resources, and we try, but you're right, we fail in those areas in some way. But with what we have...
We got to work together. I believe we have to work together to improve and make Belize a better country. Everybody has to play a role.
I agree.
I think you just hit the nail in the head when you said one word, you said together. And that's one of the feelings. We talk about Belize being a person. One issue we have here is we can't get together. Whatever organization you establish, there will always be an opposing or a different organization. And we have that issue here with the media.
Quality of life, no?
Yeah.
Challenges.
Even the media, it would be great if the media could work together, but we all see ourselves as independent entities, competing with each other, and the place is too small for that.
Yeah.
But I think that is something
we got to really now push forward, because we want to create a Belizean dream, a new Belize that certainly will offer new opportunities to all of us, today and tomorrow. And if we don't do that, then, you know, we continue creating more holes and in the ozone layer, automatically the black holes will provide higher temperatures because the sun is hitting us.
Yes, sir.
So we cannot explain it otherwise. But thanks, Ernesto.
We are part of the system, and the system does control or sometimes decides what
Thank
we
you
do.
very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the discussion. We'll take a break and we'll be back.
Good morning, Belize, and good morning. I say good morning, Belize, and good morning. And how are you this morning?
Get up every morning, like go to work from day till night. Get up every morning, like go to work from day till night. I got 7 big feet and one on the way. I got the wife that I always need. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. Put the troubles away. Good morning, Billy. Get up every morning, like go to work from day till night. Get up every morning, like go to work from day till night. Got a pocket ticket for pay, and no money there. Whoever tell me pick me this tree. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. With the troubles away. Good morning, Billy.
Right now it's time, 6 minutes after 7 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, the second day of the, is it the second week of the year already or the full first week?
This is second week, technically.
Of the new
Not
year,
a full week,
2020.
yeah.
And it promises to be an interesting and very active year, not only for Belize, but worldwide.
It's going to be an
Looking
interesting
everywhere.
year.
And the caller called, and one of the things about being an independent medium is to accept criticism and different opinions. We have to do that. And I think we do. I think we do,
but
I would like to break it down a little bit. You know, as I was saying, as an independent medium, we need to put out useful information.
Yeah.
And I think we do. We could do more detailed investigative reporting.
Yeah, I
will
agree.
not deny that.
Yeah,
I will not deny that.
I think it's across the
our news is timely.
Yeah.
Timely most of the time. You know, it's opportune. It is objective. Yes, I think sometimes we may be too objective. And
everybody
we get caught in the middle. Yeah.
Walking the fence.
That's right.
Being safe.
Yeah, that's right. Right. We're committed to the greater good.
Yeah.
That I think is definitely we have a good grade on that one. Then we present with some openness. We do openness. Sometimes I think maybe a little too open. With maturity, well, I don't know. Sometimes, like my wife says, I don't behave mature, but You know, that's
Yeah,
as
oh,
a nation, we I think we have some maturity.
But yeah,
We try to be very positive as
Exactly,
much as we
yeah.
can.
yeah.
It's extremely positive.
They don't
And of
try
course,
to-
and inclusivity. Inclusivity, we are open. We would accept more. We always say, if you want to join us, you have something you want to talk about.
Yeah.
We are willing to talk with you.
Calling, we'll listen, send an email.
Email lovefmmorningshow@gmail.com. Send us a message and say, look, I am so and so, and I am
XYZ.
very interesting and smart. I'd like to chat with you, and we'd love to. You know,
Yeah.
we would. Of course,
We have-
probably have a pre-interview or something to find out.
Just to make sure.
We will put you on, yeah.
don't
Definitely. We are willing to talk to anybody.
Well, but we don't want them to come and say, listen, I have all different opportunities. Then they come and say, this one thief, this one thief, that, and then.
Well, if you can tell us you have the facts, well, of course, that'll give us
Oh, yes.
the lead on the story.
That's true. Hi, good morning.
Yes, Happy New Year to you guys.
Happy New Year to you, sir.
Come again? We
Yeah,
lost-
I want to talk this morning about the tour guide training.
Okay. Go ahead, you're on air.
Yeah, what happened is that I noticed the tour guide training become very expensive, I believe.
what kind of
And
training?
we always hear
Tour
from
guide
the
training,
radio
okay.
about Oceania and no one, they try to help the poor people. But if you got tour guide training where it costs $1,000 for the poor people, I want to know how NECO benefit from that the poor people could get into it. Because only the people that have money could get into it. You need, so if you want to help the people in this country, you have to give them only free right, and you can't just charge people with $1,000 for one kid to go to school.
Well, I mean,
You want ban the net, you want ban this, you want ban all kind of things, ban the trailer, but yet you are charging people $1,000 for a tour guide training.
how long is the tour guide training, Carl?
What?
Usually 6 months or so.
6 months.
5 to 6 months, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
well, that's not
okay.
bad. I
thought
think
there was
I
a
told that for
workshop.
6 months.
Yeah.
No, you're getting some education, aren't you?
Yes, but what happens is that the problem we have is that we have to people who not got the money.
Yeah,
Isn't
that's
there-
always a question.
yeah.
That's always a question. Look at UB, what's
Yeah.
happening with UB right now. People want a degree, but they can't afford the tuition.
Is
That
there
is a
system?
conflict we're having. We're having, you
Is there a system where you can maybe pay as you're going along in the process?
right, or make a loan or something. Can you get any
They
financing?
should have given people some loan or so that people could benefit like that.
Yeah, that's a point.
at
I
least let
mean,
them pay up
some
front,
lending
you know, like-
institutions.
Let them go.
You have a BTEC who have loans, and I don't know. But that's a good question, Carla.
Yeah.
There must be a way to finance your education,
Yeah.
because I don't think $1,000 for 6 months is a bad price. I don't know. The value of what
It's
you
not a
get
bad
is
price, but
from
still $1,000 is a lot of money for a lot of
Yeah.
people. For most people.
But you see,
Yeah.
Tanya, this question comes up. How do you handle things like this? Where do people fit in that can't afford it?
Yeah,
They don't have the money. They want to move forward.
yeah.
What are they? We get visitors here. We get institutions that have loans that help with business and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Where does this fit into the cycle? Where do you get a loan? Where do you go
That's
there?
it. That's, yeah.
Look at let's look at the bigger world. You know, the student loans owed in the United States is incredible.
Trillions of dollars.
Trillions of dollars.
Imagine.
Because they borrow money, they get, and then they can't get jobs or they can't pay it back.
Or they
In
don't
fact,
get jobs that allows them to
Them to pay it back.
sustain the payments.
So they got caught into that. So there's the other side of that. You get into
Yeah.
credit, you get into loans, and then there is no backup on how you're going to pay that. In fact, I think one of the candidates is saying that if they have
Yeah,
a plan
yeah.
on
Try to
either
do-
canceling it or
canceling
something,
student debt.
the student loans. But this is a problem we have to address in our country.
But I think that I don't know. I always believe that we should make education a priority. I think educating people solves a massive amount of problems. You know, it gives people the tools they need to move themselves out of poverty, but also to move themselves out of mental poverty, and that is worse than physical and financial poverty. You
But
know?
before you do that, can't you admit what you can afford and what you can't?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you can afford an extra road to the airport, that I keep saying, you can surely afford to educate some of these people, you know? And listen, that road grinds my gears because
I know it's going
so
against the caller that called, but you see where it leads us immediately?
It's like,
it leads us immediately into where the money that we are
Thank you.
getting through loans or tax or whatever, how it is being spent.
how is it being spent?
Because you say that, but I will tell you, I said, but the organization or the body that loaned us the money for the road won't give it to you for education. So that money comes from another
Listen, there's
source.
But then don't borrow the money for don't borrow the money for things that we don't urgently need. Why don't we access the Green Climate Fund to save Monkey River, for the gillnets? There are so many funds around this world that if you can properly indicate what you need it for, and you can properly indicate how you're going to spend the money, you can get that money. Somebody,
there's a lot of money
for a blue economy. I mean, there is so much out there that if you're truly interested in innovative ways of moving the countries forward, you can find it. And I am just, I don't know, should I say behooved that we have such brilliant and perplexed and bamboozled by the idea that we have, you know, these massive intellect running our country, and we can't find better ways to get money for this country than to tax our people at the pump. And I mean tax at the
airport, tax you
everywhere else. And then what do we do with it? We talk about tax. Let's go back to environmental tax. The gentleman that were here the other day, what are you doing with the environmental tax?
They have no idea where it is.
Thank you. So I mean,
we went in the bushfire.
My thing is that if we had people who genuinely, for the last 30 odd years, oh no, it's almost 40 years.
Yes, 30
Ooh, crap, yes. I mean, if we had people that genuinely, and I don't mean the one or two, yeah. I don't mean the one or two, because we've had one or two.
We were trying not to go there, Tanya. We were trying to be positive this morning.
But I'm also very pragmatic. So, I mean, if we had people who, and I mean across the people, I don't mean the one or two, because we've had some excellent statements.
Not only in the public sector, but in the private sector as well.
Yeah, but it hasn't been. The majority of politicians and people who have been taking care of this country and who have been the caretaker of this country have not had the best interest of the country at heart. I'm not saying all of them, but the majority of them have not. You know, like, I want to see people in power who are willing to sacrifice political knowledge, do the right thing. And I always say this, when Sir Manuel did what he did with the entrenchment, it was the worst possible time. It was the worst thing to have been done, and I sympathize with those families who experienced that, because I was old enough to understand what that meant for those families. But he did what he needed to do. You think he knew he was going to win? He knew he would have lost. But he did what he did because the country needed it to be done. That's what we need. I don't want to hear about who could win the election, so you allow them to run rampant around this country and pillage because they win elections. I don't want to hear that. You know, I want to hear people say, listen, we tired of this. Not only the layman, we up in this level, we tired of this too. We want better. Tell we hope for the better, make we go there. And if we don't have nobody who could do better, bring somebody who could do better. We bring consultants all the time for all kind of nonsense. Bring in somebody who could, you know, if we just don't have it here. You know, because I find it unbelievable.
You think we can fix it, or it's too late?
We can fix it, man. We can fix it. There is nothing, there is not a lost cause, not a country. A country is not something that expires. And a sovereign state doesn't expire.
But it could be like a zombie, you know, just walking the line.
But I mean, do you think that every year there are people born, every year there are people who find themselves wanting more? They must do more.
You know, they say you have to hit rock bottom before you can get up.
I don't want to do that.
But you see that let's look at the present economic situation. The call about the news. Unfortunately, we can't avoid these things. We can't. You know, the sugar industry is in dire straits. Serious.
The citrus industry. Nobody's talking about that.
And it's well, we have it in the news.
But I mean, it's not like, you know, when something is happening up north, everybody, you know, it's like a flame that spreads across. People are mobile. People talk about it. When anything happens in the citrus industry, it's like only when it gets to like a point of no return, then we hear it come out. There's no
about the sugar.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens at the meeting today.
Yeah.
And for time immemorial, it's always been one against the other. The factory against the farmers, and the farmers are not happy with the factory, vice versa, and this is going on. We need to grow up and get that out of the way. Because it's for the greater good. And only leadership will create that. Only leadership, someone or a group or so that will say, but again, you have to hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
because the sugar industry is, I think, our biggest foreign exchange earner.
Is it still? Is it now?
Well, the foreign,
Well, now.
I'd like you to explain to me,
yeah.
like Troy said, and he's right yesterday. That goes directly into the central bank.
Mm-hmm.
The foreign exchange earned, say, by tourism, goes into individual pockets, which is
Exactly.
also good.
Yeah.
But it not all goes straight into the system, because at the end of the day, it's
Yeah.
that where the foreign exchange will come to pay for our imports, all the US dollars we're spending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Every time we go on Amazon and
I'm
use
just
our
about to say that,
card,
yep.
they have
Yep.
to find the US dollars to pay that.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
if that comes to an end, maybe that's what we need. Maybe that's the shock and the motivation
Yeah.
we need. The day comes to an end, and we go down to basics and rock bottom. All these benefits, all these things are going to stop.
Yep.
Then maybe we will wake up.
But I
and-
think,
and
I don't know if
do
it's my
something about it.
interpretation. I'm not from the north. I'm from the south. Let me, in case nobody realized that right now. But I think a lot of what has happened in the north, based on what I've seen, is that it's been politicized, and I think both parties use
Of course.
use those
They
issues
manipulated it
to
so they can
manipulate
keep their
it.
power and but we
Yeah,
know that's what
that's-
happens. That's why
that's-
we come back again to leadership.
And there's
come back to
nobody
leadership.
sitting down and saying realistically, listen, make us stop arguing and fight. Because the way the world is set up and the way economics is set up, we can't do this forever. We can't be
Right.
fighting forever. The golden goose is not roosting
Like
anymore.
eggs, I think it run
You
out of
know,
egg
it's
now.
it's not roosting anymore. Let's get down to it. BSI is still here. Well, ASR. And that's a good thing. I mean, imagine if ASR was not in the country. Imagine that industry probably would have fell apart by now. And so all the investment you would have had would have been gone. So I'm not saying that ASR is almighty, and yes, you should negotiate because you want everybody. We want it to have a win-win situation. We want it to be a mutually beneficial, symbiotic relationship. We're not saying that to have somebody take advantage of you, but recognize the reality of the situation. You can't be expecting to be, I don't know, to be getting everything for nothing. There are sacrifices not only in Belize but across the board, across the world. We're trying to compete right now with beet sugar. Beet sugar,
Right,
which
beet
primarily
sugar.
comes out of out of the United Kingdom, which is massively subsidized by the
That's
government.
right. Agriculture is massively subsidized.
But also because they have a real issue with food security, and so they do that. So we have to face the right situation that we are not big enough to compete. So what we have to do, we have to sustain the niche that we have.
Do we have the capacity to do that?
And that's the
we
thing.
would have to become what, another Cuba?
Well, I don't
Cuba is the example of the other extreme.
You know,
They made sacrifices. Their leader
Yeah.
back then said, you know, we are not going to do this the way the
imperialists want us to do this.
You know, and look where they are today.
But
So
you know,
the world itself does not allow you to do everything you wanted to do it.
which
There
is
are a
which
few
is my
countries-
point. Which is my point, and that is why I think that instead of fighting with ASR all the time, let's see how we can work together, because we don't operate mutually exclusive of the world market. We do not. And we certainly not have the economies of scale or the volume to compete with these massive countries, and these countries who are industrialized and whose government back their farmers. We don't have, we simply do not. That's a reality. That's not a, we don't have that capacity. You know, so if we continue fighting among ourselves, we'll lose the little bit of share we already have access to.
Well said. Good morning, caller.
Good morning.
Hello?
That's what culture again. The world, the war against sugar is a global, just like a climate change thing. It's a global fight against sugar. In the latest research, it has been proven that sugar in all the things that you eat, whether they're canned or whatever, is more harmful to the body than the animal fat.
Yeah.
So that was previous of coming attraction. So what is it? You know, I understand when you say about leadership and stuff, but man, if we stop very smart in this country, because we always put us, oh, we're smart, we got a lot of talent and this, everybody needs to make somebody hold their hand. Farmer can't realize it's a boy verified sugar. Sugar is a good food. Sugar causes diabetes, etc., etc., etc. Find a way on your own individual stamina and energy to do research on your own. But no, we want everybody hold their hand.
Yeah.
Like you can't take one curveball if you like baseball, you know what that.
Yeah.
We as a people, we can take a curveball. Look at what happened at Keycaca. It hurt my heart yesterday to hear how they threw the utility company like under the bus.
We
like
talk to everybody though, Carla. We just wait for the opportunity.
Wait. Let me finish. Okay, let's say in some quarters, or most and not all. Let's be correct in our lexicon. But practically, the mood was if you could put our against someone and just done, because it was like a catastrophe. It is unfortunate that it happened. But is it a constant happening? Is it that every year Keycaca lost electricity and water for weeks and days and months? Is it that it happened in 2018, 2017, 2016, 2015, we could go back? Even though the island has been enlarged and increased. So our media has demand cause. You could say it is such an unfortunate situation, and if there is anybody responsible for that, they should be held accountable. But no, we go to the down low as a people. We like that. So now, that's one thing. The one with the sugar, people will wake up. Sugar is not a main commodity worldwide right now. There's war against sugar. So they either combine their efforts as an association or as a people depending on sugar and find better ways or new ways of making livelihood. Third, the comparison between the North and the South is very real. Within Belize as a country, it is perceived, or the message has been put forward, that the people from the North are the most needy people. So they've always paid more attention to their plight than to the plight of the South. That is true. Maybe because they see that the poor man, they plant the cane and down south our big man, whether people are working on farm. And these are the social realities that we don't like to talk about. But it is a reality. We tend to think that the Canero, that is the poor man, is a milk farm, and down south they have these big orange farms, and the one big man own it, and now we got the poor people that they work for like they're slaves. This is a common thread from my small. I don't know, but from my small. So what I ask my people is to please, my life is not perfect. And if we don't get the life skills to deal with curveballs, we individually will not progress, and if individually we will not progress, we can't as a community progress. I can't understand, for the hell of me, I can't understand how as a people we have to get into this WhatsApp, bulldog kind of thing, and we laugh at it, and we say, hey, turn to his face, and that riles us up. Really, as I mentioned the other day when I called, these are serious issues that every country has. But we tend to laugh about it every morning. If I'm not crying, only Belize is something, and we laugh and laugh and laugh.
Well, we're not laughing. I'm sorry, we're not laughing this morning.
You know, these are serious issues, but
I want to take you back to your first comment about the Key Corker thing and the people, at least the media looking at it the wrong way, blaming the utility company. Who would you blame?
I say the people, I'm talking about the people, the general.
No, I'm
I
saying
think she's talking about the reaction to
yeah, no, and the news was put out that we put the utility companies under the bus.
Much
How would you handle a situation like that?
Well, I said it. If I were the media, I would say that this is a very unfortunate situation that has had casualties, economic, whatever, but you lay out the fact and you know that your company or whether it be a clinic or whatever, they're taking care of it. So it's not denying that there is a
so you wouldn't go into it and find out why it happened. You would patronize the situation, but you would not go into and find out why it happened. You know, we have a saying in Belize that says somebody have to dead before you fix it. And this, you yourself said from small, you know, we've had that. And that is why we react to things that way, because we know that we should not be there.
I said that if there is a person responsible or a team or a supervisor responsible, investigation has to be done, they must be held accountable. I said that. Well,
you said that. So what I'm trying to understand is that within the utility company, somebody might be responsible, but not the company.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, please clear it up for me. You know, because you put the people under the bus. You said that we jumped, the first thing we did is jump at the utility companies and put them under the bus. So we have to deal with the situation somehow. But caller, thank you very much for calling, and we always appreciate your calls. We always appreciate your calls. You always free for call. Yeah.
Did she say please not laugh so much?
Yeah, he said we're laughing too much.
I mean, listen.
I think laughter is the best medicine.
Exactly, I would not apologize for that. I mean, not because the situation is serious, it means that life becomes dull and devoid of humor.
Exactly.
No.
The time is 7:30. We'll be right back.
pocket ticket for pay. And no money there. When I tell me picnic is straight. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. With the troubles away. Good morning, Billy. Evening come and I want go home. Yeah, the shot and a piece of tell this I want go home. Evening come and I'm ready for drop. Yeah, the shot and a piece of tell this I want go home. Only from work tonight, not a single soul inside. Come only from work tonight, not a single soul inside. Man, they tell me pick the leg on, and the one on the way. But I pick the leg all gone away. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. With the troubles away. Good morning, Billy. 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 Good morning, Billy.
Good morning, Belize, and good morning. I say good morning, Belize, and good morning. And how are you this morning?
Get up every morning, like go to work from day till night. Get up every morning, like go to work from day till night. I got 7 big feet and one on the way. I got the wife that I always need. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. With the troubles away. Good morning, Billy. Get up every morning, like go to work from day till night. Get up every morning, like go to work from day till night. Got a pocket ticket for pay, and no money there. When I tell me picnic is straight. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. With the troubles away. Good morning, Billy. Evening come and I want go home. Yeah, the shot and a piece of tell this I want go home. Evening come and I'm ready for drop. Yeah, the shot and a piece of tell this I want go home. Only from work tonight, not a single soul inside. Come only from work tonight, not a single soul inside. Man, a beautiful day. Good morning, Millie. What a pretty day. Good morning, Millie. Put the troubles away. Good morning, Millie. Get up every morning like go to work from day till night. Get up every morning like go to work from day till night. That's what I get ticket for pay. And no money there. When I tell me picnic this tree. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Millie. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Millie. With the troubles away. Good morning, Millie. Evening come and I want go home. Yeah, the shot and a piece of tell this I want go home. Evening come and I'm ready to drop. Yeah, the shot and a piece of tell this I want go home. Money from work tonight, not a single soul inside. Come only from work tonight, not a single soul inside.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the morning show coming to you live and direct from our studios here in Belize City. And of course, we want to thank those who joined us earlier today during, Tanya and I's conversation, tete-a-tete, and we hope that we'll continue, of course. Right now, we have a guest who just joined us, as we promised you earlier this morning, part of it. But Tanya, I wanted to just to kind of close off our conversation and saying what we are talking about. And we do insist here that leadership is an important part. You know, like, we can't allude that we don't need leadership. We need a leadership in the country. In fact, I wrote a little note here from a persons wiser than myself and said that when it comes to leadership, you know, especially, it says, political leadership is a key element in the good nation. To change and put in the better people in place. But we'll discuss that some other day. In the meantime, I want to welcome our guests in studio, well known, and thank you for coming back. And one of our first guests for the year, I think that's
Game changer.
That's a game changer, and it's probably prognosticating a 2020 vision for 2020. And welcome, Caleb Orozco. Good morning. Good morning, Caleb. How was your holiday?
I had an accidental happy moment where
I've had a few of those accidents.
where I had some folks from San Francisco. I chilled with some folks from San Francisco.
Oh, you traveled?
Well, no, they were here.
They came here.
And they were doing their bohemian thing, their jazz. They're musicians.
Oh.
And so they were doing some bohemian things, some jazz things. And I hung out with them until 3 in the morning, which is way past my bedtime these days.
Okay.
So that was the coolest thing ever. And then, what else happened? Oh yes, I ate and I slept, and I ate and I slept.
Well, that's your Christmas and New Year's?
That's right. You were looking at my videos. Okay, good.
Yeah, well, that happens to a lot of us. We eat too much over the, you know, I was just starting to see my six-pack, and it's gone again. It's gone again. So
it's just the ring that's left.
Yeah.
Well, I placed mine in the refrigerator about a month ago.
Welcome, Caleb, and of course we need to do a little bit of history. And that has to do with all the court activity you went through a few years ago, looking for your rights in Belize. And to bring us to today, we have, in case, in fact, a lot of us may have forgotten already what Section 53 means. And we would like you to tell us, because the Chief Justice has ruled on Section 53, which is as a result of all the court activity you had before, right? Yeah.
Okay, so let's be clear. The decision that we had, I believe, on Monday, December 30th, is
uphold the previous
it was upholding the previous decision.
Okay.
One, but more precisely, the focus was a partial appeal on sex and freedom of expression,
right,
which really are about Section 16 and Section 12 of the Constitution. Interestingly, the order that we had upheld, or in this case, the term they used was confirmed, the partial appeal around 16 and 12, that the Chief Justice was right in that regard. But what they did even more fascinatingly was to set aside the modification of language that he had proposed for amending Section 53, and they basically said that voiding the particular section to the extent that it violates the Section 3, 12, 14, 6, and 16 was sufficient, and that what it suggests is that the business of amending the law would be left up to Parliament. And so work is left now to examine what the AG office will do with regards to that modification component. And in my mind, as an activist, as they say in the international spaces, as an advocate locally, I feel I have a responsibility to check to see when they will do that, how they will do that, and the process.
Let's go back for and explain, break it down for us a little more. That wording, what the change, what is it that you achieved in layman's language, and what wording needs to be changed now that the AG's office has to approve it and make it into law? What exactly changed?
I would say almost nothing actually changed, because all the previous lists of violations that the Chief Justice listed in its previous judgment was upheld.
Yes.
The only thing that was changed was the language around that the
identification.
The law does not apply to consenting adults in private.
Right.
That is the only thing that was set aside by the Court of Appeals. In simple terms, I'll describe it as we got 95% of what we wanted. But what's clear is that with any court judgment, you can't take it for granted that there's an automatic response for reviewing of laws, or there's an automatic response for changing things. You have to go forward and check in the system to see what they're doing, what they won't do, and then continue to work forward in areas of legal reform that we're concerned about.
So the judge's ruling is just a suggestion?
In this case, no.
No.
They were concerned that the Chief Justice used a blue pencil, as the term was used in the court, to scratch up, modify the language of Section 53, and in that regard, they made the modification necessary for.
Right. And this is the privacy aspect you're talking about.
It's beyond the privacy aspect, actually.
It's talking about choice and consent.
It's with the discussion, really. It talks about privacy, equality, human dignity, equal protection before the law, and it talks about sex in its interpretation to include sexual orientation. Those were the original list of things that the Chief Justice marked off as justification for rendering Section 53 unconstitutional.
Where does that put Belize now? Caleb, in lining with the rest of the world or the 21st century, or
well,
other countries that are more liberal when it comes to gender identity and this sort of thing?
Well, first of all, we're not talking about gender identity. We're talking about the issue of
rights.
Of sexual activity in privacy of the home. With regards to Belize, we have been the pace setter among CARICOM states with regards to the litigation work about decriminalizing the issues around same-sex intimacy. For us in Belize, it's important to note that the Section 53 didn't just affect persons who are attracted to the same sex, but it affected heterosexual people as well. And in that regard, it's important to note that the litigation work we did affected everybody, at least everybody who are adults 18 and above.
Right.
And that's important in the broader discussion as to what do we do next. For me, the litigation work and the decision shows that ordinary citizens in this country, if they're determined enough, stubborn enough, can use our human rights mechanisms, however weak, to then address or legitimize or bring to the table certain fundamental rights concerns that they have and win. What's also clear is that in the work that I did, is that as citizens we talk about, we complain about political leaders, but we don't understand that we are on the front, we are the last line in our governance. And in that regard, we need to value more the social leaders out there who are defending or giving life to the fundamental rights and freedoms we have in regards to basic things like housing, food, clothing, shelter, transportation. And as such, as citizens, we need to take responsibility and initiate change rather than wait for political leaders to say that this is what we're going to do on your behalf. In 2020, in my mind, it's no longer acceptable for us to waste our human potential on social media, just complaining.
I totally agree.
In 2020, it's not enough for us to see that this is what's wrong with our leaders, this is what's wrong with our legal system, and not work to fix it. As citizens, we collectively work to change, and we are complicit in the lack of change when we remain silent and do nothing.
Caleb, you just gave me further for more discussion with you this morning, because that is an area that we'd love to hear what you have to say more. But I need to come back to why you're here, what has changed with the Chief Justice, Section 53. How has this affected you personally, and those of you who need that kind of human rights protection that you went for?
Well,
same-sex attraction and so on.
So when this started, there were about 4,000 or 5,000 people protesting from between 2011 to 2016, and I'll just give a good example. So normally I avoid Love FM Christmas parade, not because it's boring or anything like that.
I feel very hurt by that. I must say that on record.
Right, that's fine. And I usually avoid crowds because, well, it's the hostility.
I'm
never in control.
Yeah.
But this last Christmas holiday, Christmas parade, I had no choice but to be stuck in traffic just because I was trying to get $20 out of the bank.
That was an accidental unhappiness.
It was an interesting moment. So I said, it didn't help that I was in my short pants. And my short pants is not just that. It's a proper short pants. And I decided I would step out the car and I would video the parade.
Because you're already there.
And because I'm already there. And I was videoing Black Panther and a few other things. And to my surprise, nobody cared if I was next to them or that I was gay. All they cared about was the parade.
Yeah.
And that was
fantastic.
A wake-up call, because then it tells me that the
progress is being made.
Right.
Yes.
And that this idea, this anxiety that our citizens have, especially the ones who are homophobes, and the ones who carry over to covert attitudes, it tells me that people understand. When LGBT Belizeans get their rights in court, the sky does not fall, and they get to live their lives.
And Christmas still comes.
And Christmas still comes. It tells me that people understand that my business of defending my right isn't going to pay their bills, isn't going to send their children to school, and that they are able to mind their own business so that my business can be taken care of by me.
But more general acceptance.
But I think also a little bit more than that. Your right is an innate right, and your right doesn't infringe on anybody's happiness or anybody's ability to live their own existence and their own truth. So I always find, and I say this because I'm a Catholic, I'm a Christian, and I think a lot of times people hide behind religion to disguise their homophobia. And I don't believe, I serve or believe in a God that would not want somebody because of who they are as an individual. So I always find that how you can be a Christian and be so opposed to an individual's own existence, you know what I mean? But I'm glad that you had a good experience, because it shows that we are beginning to be progressive in this country.
Out there,
oh, they are. They are.
Well, interestingly, I discovered just before the New Year's a place called Sit and Sip, or Sip and Sit.
Sit and Sip? You just discovered it?
Yes! I've never been in that place.
Oh, you mean you knew it was there, we just went in. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was a restaurant until I step in. They actually play music. And then...
we're old, that's
right. And then I was able to go to Thursday. I knew what it was. But I've never been to Thursday ever. And I was able to go there and enjoy myself for whatever amount of time. So
did you go alone, or?
Oh no, it was with these. I don't travel by myself ever. So there's that. But more importantly, going back to what you said about religious belief. For me, it's interesting that there's this phrase that says only God could judge. But then you have all these homophobes out there who want to play God and judge.
Yeah, that's not my place.
And more interestingly, there's this whole idea that I could control the hurricane, the weather, and I'm responsible for earthquakes, and the idea that somehow I'm immortal. And
we all have our own place to play in our own judgment.
Right.
So listen, if the earthquake comes for you, ask yourself what to do.
You see, the acceptance is there, you know, Kelly. But you had the audacity to step out.
Yeah.
And make it try to tell me that this is who I am, and you need to accept this. If you kept quiet, because the places you mentioned, you know, same-sex attracted people go there all the time, and you see them, they're there, and it's accepted. Just don't
say
have the audacity to come out and then say, I want to be right, or that's...
Well, there's an interesting culture that we have, which is live and let live, where there's this idea that if I grant you as a person permission to live at the house in a relationship, that's fine. It means then that I have the power over your life, your dignity, and so on and so on. But the moment you formalize your expectations as a citizen to be protected under the law, that is what becomes an affront to those who think that you're forcing your lifestyle on them.
Because you're not like the rest of us.
Yeah.
Basically, you're not like the rest of us. We are, forgive, I'm just going to say this, we are normal, so we can be protected. You go, wait, hold on, you don't fit.
Well, let's talk about Maria Roches in 2004. She had the audacity to take her concern to court and challenge the church. She won. She had all kinds of criticism, But the fact that she stands up for human dignity and her rights said that she is part of a long history of leaders who have been on the front line.
She was a teacher, right?
She was a teacher.
Right.
She is on the front line of this thing what I call citizens accountability to raise the bar of how the state deal with our fundamental rights.
Right. Hold a thought from you. We'll take a break and we'll come back.
Good morning, Belize, and good morning. I say good morning, Belize, and good morning. And how are you this morning?
Get up every morning, like go to work from day till night. Get up every morning, like go to work from day till night. I got 7 big feet and one on the way. I got a wife that always in need. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Millie. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Millie. Put the troubles away. Good morning, Millie. Get up every morning, like go to work from day till night. Get up every morning, like go to work from day till night. Got a pocket ticket for pay, and no money there. Whoever tell me pick me this tree. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Millie. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Millie. With the troubles away. Good morning, Millie. Evening come and I want go home. Yeah, the shot and a piece of tell this I want go home. Evening come and I'm ready to drop. Yeah, the shot and a piece of tell this I want go home. Money from work tonight, not a single soul inside. Come only from work tonight, not a single soul inside. want go home. Evening come and I'm ready to drop. Yeah, the shut and the piece will tell you so I want go home.
Going to court looking for his rights as a Belizean and be protected by the laws of the country, and what has resulted from that and where we are. And Caleb, you said that well, where it is now is that the ruling has been passed. Well, it's up to the office of the Attorney General now to put it into law and make it law. When the law is done, say that happens, like you said, you have to monitor this to make sure it happens. And I agree with you. About a year ago, we had that we are going to get rid of single-use plastics, and we had guests here and said, look, by the end of this year, we'll be already phasing this out. We find out, but nothing has happened. No law has been passed, no legislation. Importation of plastics are coming in, and that's only plastic. Yeah. So no, you're right. You've got to monitor this to see that it will be taken seriously and changes will be made. What change when it becomes law? What is that change going to be?
Well, before you even get there, what we know from our legislative process, or at least working with NAC on their Equal Opportunities Bill, what we learned is that the first step is that you must develop a working group, and then in that working group you develop a cabinet note. The next step is that you find a champion to then table it in cabinet, and once cabinet endorses it, it means then you need to go and find your resources. And what are your resources? It's financial, which is your public consultation, and it is your technical person, your drafter to draft the legislation. And so using that, one learns that when it comes to legal decision, there is no monitoring system to see that the AG office is going to follow this legal decision, because there is nobody insisting that we must respect this decision from the Court of Appeals or the CCG. No, we learned this lesson. Right. Yeah, we learned this lesson from the indigenous or indigenous friends, where they had this great decision.
From the CCG.
Yes.
Then they had to go back for implementation judgment. And then when the state got the money, there were all these difficulties in finalizing or giving life to this judgment. And so this takes me back to the idea that citizens' responsibility, and social leaders have carry the burden of responsibility to ensure that when these things happen, that we ensure that it's followed through to the end. Otherwise, we just become complicit in undermining this thing called the Constitution, which was endorsed by our citizenry in 1981. Otherwise, we weaken whatever human rights system we have, and we don't get any change. For me, not only is Maria Roches, our indigenous folks, good example of that. We know that Oceana used the legal system to look at offshore drilling. We know that with regards to things like expression in school, we know that Michelle Irvin took an issue to court with regards to the hair of her son. And so there's a big question with regards to how this case is treated or viewed for our citizenry, and that is, one, it's our primary responsibility as citizens to question the hypocrisy of institutional practices, the hypocrisy of how we operate as citizens, and the hypocrisy of our laws. There are certain things which are going to play out, which are challenging our rights right now, which is the search of this stuff and search practices.
Just to interrupt you, your lawyer, of course, Lisa Schumann, I hope she's listening, because you just brought up something, like you said, the hypocrisy of the system. And as a lawyer, I would like to get her opinion on that. So if she could call us, if she's listening, she could give us a buzz and put her lead 2 cents in it. But go ahead.
Okay, so for me, for me, this passivity that we have where we accept mistreatment, no matter what group, whether you're a person with diverse ability, a person experiencing domestic violence, this idea that you accept your mistreatment as a normal part of your citizenry, for me in 2020 is no longer acceptable.
Yeah.
And we must be prepared to challenge, or at least set the boundaries between what you can and cannot do, not only at the court level, but at schools where they think they have an automatic right, or they assume that you give up your fundamental rights, freedoms under the Constitution because you go to their institutions. And I believe that those things are happening with regards to a case that Arjun Mathura did under the Pelote High School, where she reflected that sometimes we create education rules which are not consistent with our Constitution and which undermines this idea that we value our fundamental rights. We don't. And because we don't, and I say don't through silence, that's a reflection of the leftovers of our colonial system, which has sought to pacify its citizenry in the way it engages the state and the way the citizenry has chosen to live its life. These are problematic.
You know, I have a saying I wanted to say this morning, mention, and it says, whatever you're not changing, you're choosing.
Exactly. I totally agree that.
You know,
but more than...
But is it ignorance, Caleb? Is it... If I go to court and the court rules, and as far as I'm concerned, the court, being one of the estates of being governed, makes a decision, that decision is binding. Now you're telling me now after all that happens, I still have to continue the fight to make sure it's accepted by the other part of the state.
I think it's more...
Or just lie there. I thought it should be, and this is where I would like a lawyer's opinion on this. So is that a weakness in the system, or is just the way we manipulate the system?
One of the things you learn in colonialism or colonialism history is this process of divide and conquer. We were discussing earlier off camera about this idea where people are resentful of one social group gaining progress legally, and then the other social group resenting that fact. And when you feed that kind of mentality, it means then you don't have an automatic process of progress. It also means that as citizens, we forget a fundamental point in our country governance, and that is when one social group progress, we must work and be vigilant to ensure that everybody else are benefiting, or that we move together in progress, change, and improvement of our citizenry lives. And what that means then is that if you are a homophobe and you need something to deal with poverty, or you need something to deal with prisoners' rights, or you need to deal something with women's rights, or you need to deal with something with persons with diverse ability, it's important for you to cross over to my space and talk to me about solutions. Take note.
Let's see who we have there.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning. It's Lisa Shoma.
Hi, Lisa. How are you? Happy New Year.
Thank you for calling.
Good. Happy New Year to you.
We missed you this morning.
Yeah, we missed you this morning.
And of course to Caleb.
I never thought Lisa would oversleep because, you know, she's awake all the time.
No, Lisa did not oversleep. Somebody didn't send me the memo. You know how I go.
I would wonder.
Okay.
I never miss an opportunity to sit with you guys.
I know, and we missed you. Lisa, the question. Let me put this in a nutshell. What I'm getting here is that, you know, the judge has ruled everything, and then Caleb comes and says, "Well, I still have to continue the fight." Is this a manipulation of our system, or is this normal? Does this happen in other countries? That now that the judge has ruled, I would think it would become law.
A natural process.
Yeah, it's a natural process. It would be accepted and become law.
Yeah. FYI, this is very normal.
Okay.
It happens all the time. In other words, not simply because you get a decision from the court and you've won a victory, means that automatically enforcement or implementation will take place.
Okay.
What was interesting about the Court of Appeal decision is that the Court of Appeal actually went further than they were asked to go by the state. Now, they do have that right. They do have the right to look at the whole decision, and they explain their reasoning in the case. All the state was asking the Court of Appeal to do is to look at a very limited point, which is, does the definition of sexual orientation include itself within the meaning of sex in the terms of Section 16 of the Constitution, which is the clause where you are not allowed to discriminate on the basis of sex, religion, creed, ethnicity, all of that. And the court did rule on that. The Court of Appeal has said that the Chief Justice was right, was justified in including the definition of sexual orientation within the meaning of sex. And they explained very carefully why. But they also went further, and what they have done is to undo something that the Chief Justice did, which is to include an extra sentence in Section 53 of the Criminal Code. Now, they are not disputing that the Chief Justice has the right to do so. They are not disputing that this is a power allowed to the courts within the Constitution. What they say, and they take a very conservative approach to this, what they say is that that power is to be used sparingly, and that by striking down the Section 53 applicability to consenting adults, that was sufficient. And so now they say Parliament must do its part. And that is something that they're permitted to say. So there is no sinister plot. There is no intention on the part of the state to try
block or to hinder.
Yes, not to comply. This is the issue with courts, that people expect sometimes black and white, and you may actually end up with shades of gray. No pun intended.
Right. Lisa,
and that's what just happens. You have to find your way to enforce and implement the right. Now, bear in mind that the state has some time to decide whether it will appeal this decision or not. So we are waiting to see what is going to happen. That is a right they have. I'm sure they will take their time to consult. I think we've already had this answer on the media. Give us time. We have to look at it and make a decision.
Lisa, I was asking Caleb earlier, where are we now? Are we moving into the 21st century when it comes to LGBTQ issues comparable to, say, Europe or the United States? My question is this: is the conflict here? Are we in Belize still having an issue with identifying what sexual orientation means socially, or gender issues?
I think, looking at the comments on media, especially social media, particularly in response to stories that Love FM ran, to stories that Channel 5 ran, and that is on social media, it's clear to me that there is still a vocal backlash against certain ideas. But then again, we are an interesting country. On the one hand, we like party, rum, celebrate, guam, bad,
adultery,
every other form of Christian sin you can imagine.
We were just talking about that.
But yet, we have a problem with two people holding hands. We have a problem with two people wanting to express their partnership openly. And I'm not talking nothing like...
nothing sadistic.
Nothing like serious PDA. I don't want to characterize it. Nothing more talking about open public display of affection, because we don't even like that between two heterosexual people let alone. Right? Don't like them things. We don't want our children to see adults expressing affection.
Yeah.
In any form.
It's true.
But however,
we sexualize everything though.
Feel very free, correct, to sexualize everything, and not only that, to then offer the Bible as examples of what should be done, of rectitude.
Yeah.
And we talk about Sodom and Gomorrah without understanding that Sodom and Gomorrah was a response to the inhospitability of ancient peoples purportedly to an angel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can't pick and choose your
religious
no, you
commitment.
Can't pick and choose your religious history.
Yeah.
Please.
I agree. We were talking about the same thing earlier.
That's the fact. So, but we are that hypocritical as a group of people.
But
we like something when we like it, but we don't like it when we see somebody else do it and we don't agree with it.
Yeah.
But Lisa, we're still talking about two different. When you talk about religion, basically, like Jesus himself said, you have God's law and you have the state's law. So right now we're dealing with the state's law.
DJ said that.
The
DJ said that. He was clear.
Yeah. So right now we're talking about the state's law. You know, your religious beliefs basically should keep them to yourself when it comes to that, right?
But hold on. You know what the court said?
Mm-hmm.
We are here to enforce the laws of the state, including the Constitution, and the Constitution gives you religious freedom, and that includes freedom from having any religion at all.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the state cannot legislate religious morality, and the CJ was clear about
That's
this.
right.
The Court of Appeal did not overturn or touch that in any way, shape, or form. In fact, they say that what they are called on to interpret is the laws of the state. They're clear about that.
Mm-hmm.
You see? So now, when you talk about implementing a legal decision, these are some of the issues that you run into. I mean, don't forget, the Maya land rights cases are very settled.
Yeah.
Right.
However, the implementation is dragging on.
Yeah. Sadly.
Well, that's why they like they said, the first, second, third,
Caleb
sixth.
is right. There's other laws that we have to look at as people. The stop and search laws, the take your picture law, various forms of freedom of expression. You know, whether the bus transport laws are being followed. Every citizen has a right, if you travel on that bus and you are subjected to overcrowding or the bus line not having enough backup buses, you have a right to challenge that.
Yeah.
You have a legitimate expectation, and that is a legal principle. If the state tell you that something is a rule or a law, you have a right to expect that the state will uphold that law.
But I think more than that, I think we have a fundamental problem as individual citizens about exercising and owning our responsibility and the rights that come along with those rights and responsibilities that we all innately subscribe to by the Constitution. I think a lot of us are afraid to even exercise those rights, or even afraid to own them and to take ownership and responsibility for them. I mean, just look at the voting, just look at it extends more than just to your personal.
Except when you get on Facebook and run your mouth or run your fingers on the keyboard.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
it's only on social media people have the audacity to have their rights. When you talk to them in public and when you need them to stand up in the social platform that they're required to, nobody has any rights.
Yeah, we have to invite Lisa to come in and talk about those areas a lot more.
Yes.
Because but if you don't know how to access those rights, Caleb is an excellent example of he decided he will access the rights, but Caleb, you have to have support to do that.
Well, Caleb didn't wake up knowing this.
Agreed.
You understand?
He was brought to the light.
No, but he was you were educated somehow, you found out somehow about it.
I thought it would take 10 years.
10 years is a long time.
Well, and so she has created a magic figure Nobody likes to have their lives being put on hold for 10 years.
But not only that, to be put on display and to be targeted and to be questioned and to be scrutinized.
She also makes a point. I was looking. I do a lot of research, and for 2019, the World Justice Project points out that our civil and criminal justice factors under our governance is basically weak, and it identified sub-factors which are discrimination, which are also helping to undermine the weaknesses of whatever human rights institution that we claim we have.
Yeah, right.
And so this points out to another issue, which is we take it for granted that the enforcement mechanisms we have is only the Supreme Court, the Magistrate Court, the Court of Appeal, and we don't appreciate the other elements which are the Ombudsman Office and the Teachers Commission, the National Youth Commission, and the need to centralize those things in a way that is accessible to the ordinary person who does not understand law. And that in itself is a whole set of work that has been taking place since 2009, when the government of Belize accepted a recommendation to do a feasibility study to address the development of a national human rights institution.
We get your point. We get your point, Caleb.
So these are your elements which has to go further than just a court decision.
Well, here I want to invite Lisa to come in because, and when I said about, you had assistance to do this.
Right.
You had international help and all that. She mentioned a case if you ride the bus and you find something that
not
person
liking your standards,
where does that person go? And I'm not going to open that discussion now, but that's the point I'm getting at. You know, locally, where do they walk off the bus and say, okay, I need the bus system transport to change?
But I think even more than that,
Lisa is still on
we need to feel like we can do that. I think a lot of people feel like they can't or they should.
Right. Lisa, go ahead. I mean, your comments on that. I mean, the ordinary person.
Thing any citizen has to do.
Go ahead. We're listening.
Go directly to the person in authority and demand that they listen to what you are saying and then document it, follow it up in writing and say, when we met, this is what I asked for, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Please give me a timeline by which you will implement. And if that doesn't happen, then you have to look about getting legal advice. And please, we have several very, very interesting, learned young lawyers. Don't come knocking down my door.
Lots of enthusiasts out there.
Well, there you go. Where are these lawyers? We need to know they're available.
Yes, exactly.
You see, we need to know they're available. We need to know how much pro bono work can be done out there. You need leadership. You need guidance.
It can't all be pro bono. It can't all be pro bono.
Lawyers need to eat.
Of course.
The marijuana issue.
Yeah.
This group love run after the mouth about the marijuana issue, and I've pointed out to them, get a steering group first of all, decide what you want, do some research. None of this includes having to get a lawyer.
Right.
And long ago I said to them, I am willing to file, but you need to put some skin in the game, man.
Yes. I agree. You got to decide to commit to it.
Yeah.
And there are people who can advise you. Yeah.
If you feel you are going to benefit from this, great. But then you have to have the commitment.
Right.
So,
and that's what we'll have. Lisa, thank you very much. I don't want to hold you up on the phone.
I want to say one thing about the state, Sir Ernesto.
Okay.
I have to pay tribute to the state for following up on human rights conventions, because without their commitment to the ICCPR, we may not have gotten as far as we did. And that is critical. And I can say that Caleb has been included in a lot of these human rights convention discussions, which is great.
Yeah.
So just looking at the court case doesn't tell the whole story.
How you got
He's
there?
right. You have to follow up behind the scenes to make sure you can implement. That is critical and important.
Okay.
So thank you for having me
Lisa,
on.
thank you very much.
Calling. Thank you
I
for
will
joining.
continue to enjoy.
You
Thank you
have
very
a
much.
beautiful day and a happy rest of it. I hope your year is off to a great start.
Yep, it is. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
We'll take a break and we'll come back, and if Kilber doesn't mind, we'd like to chat with you now on a slightly different angle. Of course, the opinions you had earlier about politics in the country and all that. We talk a little bit about the community, the LGBTQ community, and how is that fitting into the whole conversation and the social acceptance of the country.
Well, there's a revolution of ideas going on.
Right.
And so in that comes the change, in that comes the vigilance of citizenry, in that comes the idea that if you collectively work as social groups across issues, you begin to understand the political force that drives the development concerns that we have as citizens.
Yeah.
You also begin to understand that the human potential, which is our ability to innovate, to have creative ideas, to use abstract things like technology.
Let's talk more. Let's talk a little bit more about that. We'll take a break and we'll come back.
What a pretty day. Good morning, Billy. Put the troubles away. Good morning, Billy. Get up every morning like go to work from day till night. Get up every morning like go to work from day till night. Got my pocket ticket for pay and no money there. When I tell me picnic this tree, what a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. Put the troubles away. Good morning, Billy. a pretty, pretty day. Good morning, Billy. Put the troubles away. Good morning, Billy. Get up every morning, like go to work from day till night. Get up every morning, like go to work from day till night. Got a pocket ticket for pay, and no money there. Papa tell me pick this tree. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. With the troubles away. Good morning, Billy. Evening come and I want go home. Yeah, the shot and a piece of tell this I want go home. Evening come and I'm ready to drop. Yeah, the shot and a piece of tell this I want go home. Money from work tonight, not a single soul inside. Come only from work tonight, not a single soul inside. Man, they tell me pick the gun, and the one on the way. But I pick the all gone away. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. What a beautiful day. Good morning, Billy. With the troubles away. Good morning, Billy. 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 Good morning, Billy.
Good morning, Belize, and good morning. I say good morning, Belize, and good morning. And how are you this morning?
Welcome back, everyone. The Morning Show, and we're on the last leg of our show. We're 21 minutes away from 9 o'clock. And in the studios this morning, we have Caleb Orozco, who's no stranger to anyone. We know he's, well, like you said, for the last 10 years, deciding that you need your rights and you need those protected. And along the way, you've gone through a lot of experiences. The Caleb we've heard of over the years is the Caleb who's been attacked simply because of who you identify as, who your friends are, who you're attracted to, and a lot of what we would call homophobes, or those who don't understand, have victimized you. Over the years, you've made a lot of progress when it comes to the legal system and that situation. You've achieved the decisions you want, basically. The fight continues. But what about your personal life? How has it affected your personal life? You mentioned earlier about the Christmas parade, and you were out there and you said, I felt good. All of a sudden I could stand in public and nobody would be chastising me for what I represent, who I think I am. Do you feel stronger also personally, emotionally, because of all what you've been through in the last 10 years?
2020 for me is the year of hope. I've dedicated a decade of my life to work, and now I'm hoping I could dedicate another decade of my life not to work, but to develop a personal life which is meaningful.
Yeah.
Now, I'm grounded in this idea that if you're a human being, you must have purpose. And that purpose must be grounded in something you value. And in my case, it's being able to deal with matters of the heart, and it's being able to then deal with broader issues of partnership with institutions, It's being able to to see, for example, that my colleagues from PETO, my colleagues from our circle, and recently my colleagues from Belize Trans Scholars, to see them stepping up, being more visible in their leadership, and representing their various communities in very clear ways.
Because it wasn't that way in the beginning, was it?
It wasn't.
You did get the support of your own community.
Because part of the problem is this idea of support in the closet. And what does that mean? You go and do it. We support you 100%, but we can't
go out there.
We can't go out there. And I understand that, but the problem with that kind of mentality is that it's not only is it colonialistic in its history, it gets you nowhere, and you don't get the change you want. And so for me, 2020 makes the point that Belizeans, in our history, we have a long line of social activists who have created or generated a culture of resistance around the hypocrisy with which we live, and have stood up for core principles of change and defense of rights, because that is a thing that affects them. So this is the kind of hope I see in 2020, right along with congratulating the state on its ability to take a strong position at the OAS with regards to LGBT resolutions, with regards to its announcement at the Universal Periodic Review in Geneva in 2018, and in regards to its announcements at the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights in Geneva as well. No other state among CARICOM countries have accepted so many human rights recommendations around LGBT issues other than Belize. But what does that mean? It means then that we have an obligation to work on gender, to work on violence, to work on issues of poverty, and continue to push things forward. For generations, we will have these problems, and it requires our vigilance for generation to keep going to bring the change. Because for a country that is 408,000 people estimated, and generating only $109 billion in gross domestic product, we are, in a sense, undermining our productive capacity as a country, undermining the solutions that we have to get people out of poverty and get people's lives stable. We cannot afford to waste our human capital because of religious morality, because of our anxieties and fears. We need to figure out how we can work together to get things done.
So our obstacles are beyond your facing your community. It's our own selves that are creating generally these obstacles.
Our own limitations.
Yeah.
We as citizens are creating those limitations, and we need to ask ourselves, how do we overcome and focus on solutions? We're very focused on social media. Let's see if we can organize ourselves with recommendations in social media and organize ourselves in real life to address the community issues that we see. That is my challenge to the rest of people in this country who are concerned with their communities.
But to do that, we need to be unified.
We need to unify,
there has
yes.
to be a unity. There has to be we have to start agreeing with each other.
Not always agreeing,
no,
but
we
respecting.
have to agree to disagree.
Respecting, recognizing what we have in common, working towards that, recognizing that there is no free ride as Belizeans, that the politician who we elect as leaders are not going to solve all our problems, and that we must be in spaces of power, driving passionate issues that affect us to bring this thing called change and stability that we're looking for.
But I think also to add to that, I think we have, as citizens of this country, have to accept that we, as each individual, we have to put in our pound of flesh in the fight. It can't be that you will sit back and have one or two people advocating and you wait to reap the benefits of that. I think that is what has us where we are, that we need to take individual ownership of all the things we want to see happen, all the changes we want to see. And I think we are opposed to change, we're opposed to revolution, we're opposed to rocking the boat. We have been acculturated by our colonial masters through an easy, well, not an easy, but a non-violent and a non-confrontational independence that we have been...
It's created a complacency.
Yeah, exactly. We have been so complacent in terms of everything with a natural evolution. So let us just wait and everything will naturally occur. But the change we want and the change we need cannot be a natural evolution. It has to be individuals taking action, even if it's just to get up and say, I disagree with this and this is what I want to see done. I am voicing and verbalizing that opinion. But even that we're afraid for, because we're afraid for bread and butter, we're afraid for be chastised, we're afraid to be ostracized, because mind you, once you make a point and once you disagree, you're an outcast, particularly if you're a woman, because then you're a fighter and you're aggressive. And then you like argue, you're too combative. So you are already labeled, you know, and so I think people are afraid to be labeled, but
I think you're reflecting right there what's on social media. Caleb, you're on social media, I'm sure, a lot more than I do. And the impression I get, because I'm not much on it, I just follow the basic news every day and some of it. But what I get is that you can't put anything on Facebook and somebody will oppose it.
Oh, yes, anything, yeah.
You could put down the best, you know, I could say Tanya is one of the nicest people I know. Somebody will come up and tell you no.
Well,
they probably deserve that though.
let me go back to what she's saying. For me, the best thing for our country is if we can generate a revolution of ideas and approaches.
I agree.
The best thing for our country is to remember the forgotten heroes in this country, who are women. And that women are the invisible hand that have added legislative reform, that have generated income, that have taught or prepared these people called ministers for their jobs.
Have you expressed this on Facebook? These very same words. If you haven't, I'll tell you, go out and say that, and then you come back and tell me what reactions you're getting. That will give you a feel of what you're going to deal with.
Well, there are 2 points
because
here.
You're right. I like how you phrase it.
There are 2 points here, and that is we've got to learn to stop undervalue the contribution of women and to reflect their power and skill and knowledge of our communities and reflect that in cabinet as well as the wider parliament. We have taken too much for granted the contribution of women, and that has to change. But with regards to social media, social media is a teaching tool that visibilizes a lot of social commentators, that provides insight into how we think as citizens. And if you are smart about the use of social media, you can use it to educate.
Exactly.
Or you can use it to marginalize and oppress.
And to bully.
And to bully. And this is why we have to understand the responsibility of our citizenry, that while we are free to express our opposition to an idea, we are not free to disrespect the individual that you're debating with.
Right.
2020 for me is an year where we raise the bar of respect and we raise our action that reflects the desire that all our citizens are to be treated fairly.
Respect. Equally. Respect.
And equally. But, and so what does this mean in terms of practice and function? We need to look at our relationship between the genders. You can't be in a home and tell me, I want to cook for you, but you have a husband, so you need to go cook for the husband. That's the problem.
I totally agree with that.
You can't just tell me I'm allowed to womanize, I'm a man, and then you must feel no sense of responsibility to pay the medical, school, food bill of your child after your child come into this world.
Absolutely.
You can't come to me and tell me that I won't babysit because I work as much as you, or you don't do nothing home. That doesn't work like that. You can't, and then we go even further than that. The idea that you have a right to kill me because I sexually harassed you, but when you're calling a woman, that woman does not have the right to retaliate against you because God says, go ye out and multiply. That's your right to call a woman. That's not how this works. Fair is fair. When it comes to a person with diverse ability, you can't just take it for granted that you are railroad that person through the court, put her in jail because you can't hear or understand what you have to say. You have a responsibility to ensure that person understands what the issues are and be able to defend themselves. That is the golden thread in our justice system called human dignity. You can't come to me and say I'm religious and then forget in your religious history that the Bible did not have homosexuality in it until 1946, but the revision of the Bible that was reproduced and paid for by Biblica was produced in 1983 and not understand that when the reference to homosexuality did not exist. It was a discussion on pedestry, which is a sexual relationship with boys. If you do not understand your religious history, don't expect me to then accept your position as accurate, because what you're showing me is that you are unable to value my human dignity, you are unable to reflect your Christian values, and you are unable to independently think about what your Bible is to be used in relationship to the treatment of people you don't understand.
But not only that, but more than that, even if my Bible says that, and even if your Bible says that, that has no bearing on you. That has absolutely no bearing on you.
Is tolerance.
You have your right,
tolerance.
Exactly, to believe what
I don't understand you, that's okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know, you have your own rights, you have your own beliefs, the world is made up of diversity. I have a saying that says the universe doesn't allow perfection.
It does not.
Unfortunately, that's exactly what's happening. We're a bunch of citizens expecting perfection and not looking in our own mirror. That's exactly what's happening.
That's right. So, and tolerance is what we are losing. Not only beliefs. Worldwide. Tolerance with migration, tolerance with color, because no, that's a bigger issue. Color. All of a sudden, you have black, white, and persons of color. On this table, we are persons of color, or either you're black or you're white. You know.
So that's the trend, by the way.
Exactly. But unfortunately, America tends to set the trend, and we start to accept it.
But also, you're leading into a very good point. I think that we identify more with the outside world, particularly American, and we do identifying as Belizean. We seem to readily be able to adapt our customs and talk about little things like Thanksgiving. And I bring this up not because it's a pet peeve of mine, but the simple thing. We embrace ideas and things that are foreign to us more easily and acceptingly than we do what is innately Belizean. And that reflects down in everything.
Right. And it affects the way we think, it affects how you operate.
You're talking about the globalization of ideas and culture, but you're also talking about the inadequate reflection of us as citizens as to what makes us Belizeans and
that is what we need to identify. We need to identify what makes us Belizean. Unfortunately, we started this morning. The question was I asked her, if you were to describe Belize as a person, what kind of person would Belize be? And you know, it would be another hour for us to continue talking about. But that's exactly the point. We adopt. I'll give you another peeve of mine. Our flag is not red, white, and blue. Our flag is blue with traces of red and white. But we are adopting all the buntings, everything from America, which is red, white, and blue, and that's what we see all over the place.
We see red, white, and blue.
Our national anthem, we play it up to this day, played by a foreign band. We don't have our own recording of our own national anthem. We have to fix these things and become Belizean.
Well, let's start about a basic thing on sexuality. We're Americanizing sexuality around LGBT.
Yeah.
Well,
now you're talking about
going to ask you about that. I was going
right.
So if I ask you, Caleb, what does how far? Right now it's LGBTQIA. You know, and let me explain. That stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, and asexual or ally.
Yeah.
Okay, for me it's very simple. We know there are 26 letters in the alphabet. I'm going further. For us here.
Let's stop at what letter?
In this case, we're not at the anything beyond I. So that means LGBT and I. That's it.
Okay.
Any extra is a process of discovery for the individual.
I agree.
Right.
It is not the responsibility of church leaders, of journalists, or anybody else, or mothers to say, I will instill this belief
unless you bring it out and you insist that it's to be accepted. You see, this is where the conflict comes in. The media, if it, you know, somebody, you have those who are non-sexual or asexual, or they can't decide.
Yeah.
You're right, it's the individual's person. But then if you come to me and say, no, I can't understand that, so obviously I'm going to have to react some way or the other to something like that. But anyway, your last words are yours, Caleb, before we go this morning. Interesting conversation.
For me, it's very simple. We perpetuate our own mistreatment by remaining silent, and as citizens, we can't afford to be silent when our fundamental rights are being undermined, attacked, or threatened. And as leaders, whoever we are in this country, they have a responsibility not just to reinforce the power that they have, but to remember that they are in service of its citizenry, and as such they are responsible to find solutions. At the end of the day, we are not to wait for anybody to tell us what to do. I say if you are informed, inspired, and can be sustained by pain that is driving a concern, organize and address the problem.
Yeah.
Do it.
I agree. Absolutely.
I think with that,
Can't even add
well
to that.
said. And I just want to clarify, when you said we, you weren't mention, you were talking generally about Belize.
Citizens.
That's right.
Belize.
Citizens of Belize. Well, Dorian, thank you for focusing the cameras. You know, our cameraman, Dorian, of course, he also does other work around here. So he's not only a cameraman. And
Victor is our MC today.
You know, Victor didn't win the 2020, you know, the 20.
I know.
You know, I was, you know, but he went after that. But
we also disappointed.
Anyway, but we, and Karen in the studio, and of course Andrew streaming us on Facebook, and Julia for producing. And like I say, you could drop us an email at lovefmmorningshow@gmail.com if you want to join us, and I'm sure our producer will consider you and look and see if you have something to say, which we want to do that. We want to open up as an independent medium. We want to have acceptability of everyone and openness.
And give us a call if you can. Want to come on the show.
And those who called this morning, of course, wherever you are, no matter what your opinion is, we accept it. And of course, sometimes we may conflict with you, and that's only normal.
We're only human.
We're only human. Some of us are more human than others. You know, like the little boy was asked to give us a sentence with the word beans, and he said, "We're all human beings." So it's your definition of it. Thank you very much, everyone, for being with us this morning. It's always a pleasure, and we'll be back tomorrow. Be kind to somebody today. Belize and beyond. Thanks for choosing love. Bye-bye.
Good morning, Belize, and good morning. I say good morning, Belize, and good morning. And how are you this morning?
Get up every morning, life, go to work and get till night. Get up every morning, life, go to work and get till I got 7